listening to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network, the nonprofit organization that strives to address the staggering disparity in resource availability for individuals suffering from mental health disorders, processing disorders, addictions, trauma healing, and sexual identity challenges. Together, we strive to end the stigma associated with these challenges so that true healing can begin. Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network. I'm your host, Ange, and today we welcome Nicolle Natttrass, straight from Canada, the author of Just the Two of Us, A Safe Place for Tender Hearts to Land. Parents, teachers, counselors, and social workers are often at a loss about how to help young children who can't adequately describe the way they feel after experiencing anxiety, stress, or trauma. That does not diminish the need for children to be able to express themselves in a safe, non-threatening environment and feel connected to someone who cares. Nicolle, an addiction counselor and world-renowned journaling expert, shares how to connect with children in a way that allows for creativity and healing in Just the Two of Us. She came to what she calls tender-hearted work following a personal trauma experienced by her child. Although her son did not suffer serious physical injuries, the emotional and mental impact was significantly life-changing. Nicolle worked diligently through the use of a journal to help her son explore his feelings, thoughts, and ideas in a safe, creative, and fun manner that she details in this gentle guide. Just the Two of Us is a tender-hearted guide on how to use creative journaling as a key recovery tool to help children, age 4 and up, to connect and process stress, anxiety, and trauma. Nicolle's professional expertise is a result of her distinct and unique careers in counseling, theater, writing, and teaching. A graduate from the University of Victoria in theater led her to become a professional actress and playwright. She learned to master her own artistic and creative practice of using journaling for self-care, which has led her to a fulfilling career teaching others the value of journaling. In 2007, she became a certified addiction counselor. She continues to advocate for the use of creative modalities as an access point for clients, including children, to help improve mental health, specifically to increase positive mental health and help heal and recover trauma, stress, addiction, and anxiety. Nicolle is now the creator of 4 creative journaling programs and curriculum workbooks designed from a trauma-informed lens with a focus on creative self-care. Also on her list of accomplishments, solo book author, contributing author to 3 new books, and co-leader of retreat weekends and performer writer of 3 plays, and of course, podcast guest on this podcast. So, what are we waiting for? Fill up your coffee and let's get started. Okay, good evening. Actually, we're in different countries, but we're in the same time zone. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And we just talked about doing our stretches to wake up because it's 7 p.m. where both of us are. I think both of us had a long work day. And yet I can already tell we're excited listeners to talk about our subject today, which is a book. I am really thrilled to have Nicolle Nattrass. And if I said it wrong, the funny part is she's going to correct it. No, I got it right. Okay. Yes,
it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
Awesome. I'm very excited to have Nicolle here, though, to talk about her book, the evolution of her book, and really why she's here joining us today. And so I'm going to press mute on my microphone and Nicolle, kick us off. Tell us why you're here. And then let's kick off talking about your book, where it started, the journey. Just continue to enlighten us from the very beginning. Go for it.
Okay. I am here because I love recovery. I believe 100% in recovery on so many levels, whether it's recovery from substance misuse, whether it's recovery from trauma, from stress, from anxiety, from the pandemic. So anytime I have an opportunity to talk and support recovery, I was really attracted to the title Recovery Advocate. I really feel like that's part of my life's work. And I'm an addiction counselor and mental health and trauma informed practitioner. I'm an author. And before all of that, my first career was in theater. So I was a professional actor, playwright, dramaturg, and sometimes reluctant director. And I'm here really to talk about my work in recovery around creative expression in creative journaling. And that's really where the foundation of my work is. And during COVID, I had the opportunity to write my first book called Just the Two of Us, A Soft Place for Tender Hearts to Land. And it's a book about how to use creative journaling for parents, caregivers, really anybody who loves and cares and advocates for children to really help them have a soft place to land and process what's going on for them. I guess the inspiration to start writing the book was COVID. I had actually reached out to this publisher previously, like about 4 years earlier, to talk about my work in recovery, because I also work with adults. I create curriculums and programs to support folks who are in recovery, and they're launched at treatment centers. And I had approached her about possibly publishing one of my workbook curriculums for adults. And then COVID hit. And, here all of us were all of a sudden homeschooling. Everybody's schedule was in chaos, so many transitions. I had my own son at home, and I saw the stress for the family, you know, and I called upon what I have been trained and developed in, which is journaling. And so I thought, now's the time. I contacted the publisher in New York, a really small but beautiful publishing company called the Zebra Ink. And she said, Nicolle, I have so many authors who are writing their books right now, and I can give you a great deal because of that, but you need to write it within 3 months. And so here I was at home, like everybody else, pivoting online. My workshops and curriculums were now pivoting online. I had my son at home and my husband working, and we're trying to homeschool, do the whole thing. And I wrote a book. And she encouraged me to launch a sample chapter. And I launched that sample chapter and I sent it out to a lot of my colleagues. And the response that I got was so, so positive. People started using my approach with their kids to help them through COVID. And that gave me the fuel to keep going and to write the book. And so it was launched in 2020. I did a revision in 2021 and added more to the book. And yeah, that's my first book. And then, like the universe does, then I ended up being asked to be a contributing author to 3 new books on journaling and 1 on coaching using creativity as an access point. So it kind of just took off.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to break down a few of those things. In episode 15, we talked with Sandra Rostarola, the author of Making Friends with Monsters. And her book, which I absolutely am in love with, was 12-year-old Sam's journey of learning to express and deal with emotions through the language of monsters. So of course, listeners, if you don't already know this, no one is allowed on this podcast as part of the book club unless I've read the book. So I have read Nicolle's book ahead of time, and I have several quotes ready to go through and walk through, or several aha moments as part of it. And Nicolle's book is walking through a different age group. Okay. It's walking through journaling and helping. And much of your book, Nicolle, is you're walking through with your 4 and 5-year-old son, and he's at that age, and through his struggle with PTSD from a severe car accident
Mhm.
and really utilizing, so in Sandra's book, she's using the language of monsters for individuals to learn how to use that language to express emotions. And in your book, for those younger 3, 5, 6 year olds, right,
Mhm.
using journaling and art and expression and coloring to express emotions and tragedy and sorrow and all of that. So can you maybe talk about, I know you kicked us off by saying, and
Mhm.
in your resume or your CV is your addiction counseling and your recovery of that component. However, this is a transition, right? This is in a child's world. This journaling is, listeners, very applicable, having been in addiction recovery, very applicable to all age groups. So I want to be very clear about this. But the tender heart part of it really spoke to me, because as I was reading the chapters leading up to this, and I was envisioning your son going through this journey with you, and then
Mhm.
I thought about other children going through challenges, and especially when you talked about COVID and you talked about the incidents of children being at home and seeing domestic violence and the higher risk of child protective services and abuse during that time period. And now we're several years out from that. And so we have potential children that don't really know how to express that. However, they could express it through journaling. So this is a long question. I should just stop
Mhm.
right now and just say, how did you get from working in the addiction field to taking the step back and doing this masterful piece in journaling for this tender age of, I would say, 3 to 6 year olds?
Yeah, how did that happen? Well, first of all, what I just want to say thank you because for what you said about it being applicable in all areas, because a lot of adults buy my book who are in addiction recovery and essentially, say this is a book for kids, but really I'm doing this work myself. And so I do create programs for adults and for families who are in recovery from addictions. And I guess for me, where I started this work from is first of all, having the courage to talk and to bring my personal experience to a book, not just my professional expertise. That took me a long time, and I know I struggled with that with my publisher. Do I want to talk about what our family went through? And I think I've done it in such a way that is respectful of my son as well as heartfelt, because it is that idea of tender hearts. And my book really is for, I would say, ages 3 to 12, doing this expression. And really, it's more, I call it journaling, but I would really say it's creative expression on the page. And for me, I think the real pivotal point happened when our family was in this severe car accident, and my son was 4 at the time. And having been trained as an addiction counselor in trauma as well, I worked at a women's treatment center in downtown Toronto for many years. And I could see what was happening to my son. I could see that there was PTSD. And when you look around at what the resources are in our world for children ages 3 to 12 for therapy, those choices are very limited. So we have a mental health crisis across our world, and we have children and their parents who are on waiting lists for programs that are often not accessible. And so for me, I live on an island. My family lives on an island. And I was immediately, and I'm connected, I'm very privileged and connected. I was trying to connect with people to get some help for my son. And when you have trauma and you're 3 years old, it's not appropriate for you to be going into talk therapy. That's not an option. And so, really looking at what the options were, and I did find a play therapist, and we started that immediately. I have a great deal of respect for play therapy. And one of the things that naturally I drew upon was my own experience, knowing that the journal, an actual physical, large journal, blank journal, can be a container for what was going through for our family. And so I started to model that and model that work the same that I would do with modeling a client, where I would sit down at the kitchen table with one side of the page blank and start drawing or coloring And soon, my son would come up next to me, and it's a very, very tender sharing time. It's not a performance based time where we think of teaching children. In schools, children are taught you must follow the instructions, you must do this, it needs to look pretty. Often that's the message that we're giving, instead of like, I'm landing at the page as an example and modeling, like, I'm feeling anxious today, or I'm missing something today, or I'm worried about something, or I'm happy about something. And the next thing you know, my son is coming up, being able to have a soft place to land, to process. And it was really about holding that space. And what ended up happening really quickly was fears coming out, was images of the car accident, which are in the book. And it's really quite incredible. And as I started to do this work, of course, keeping the play therapist connected, it was really clear that this was just so, so important to not deny and not try to shape his experience, but literally let him have a safe place to express everything that was going on for him. And it was really an incredible experience, which we continued for a number of years.
So I'm looking back at some of the quotes that I wrote down from your book. One of the things that stood out to me, and I wrote it down and I bolded it, was on page 11. So listeners, Nicolle and her family had a very severe car accident. And while the son had, bruises and stuff, his father had severe injuries. And so, the car caught on fire and glass flew all over the place. And he was 4 years old. And if you can imagine ambulances and all of that in the mind of a 4-year-old. And then he goes back to the school. And the school, so on page 11, you talk about the school system and the teacher did not believe in PTSD in children and refused to accommodate your son's needs. And I read that and I just thought, what decade are we in that was so? Can you share vulnerably about that?
Yeah, we still have a long, long, long way to go around PTSD awareness. And I just want to add one piece to that story too, because the car accident happened actually the day after my son's first experience at preschool. And so it was his first experience at all with being separated from us. And so there was a connection that was made, unfortunately for him, that there was a connection with the car accident and being separated from his parents in school. And so, when we went into kindergarten, and grade one, there has always been also the car accident was in September. Actually, that's kind of the anniversary of it. And there was a lot of my son became extremely sensitive to sounds, and there was no accommodation made at all. And there was a lot of denial and a lot of resistance. And I was just telling my friend the other day, I was remembering, and this is how far we still need to go. Remembering one of the principal's comments to us, we would go in, have a conversation, and really outline, here's the letter from our play therapist. This is what she's recommending. These are all the facts here. And him coming out of the meeting and seeing my son, and he goes, this kid, he looks fine. Like again, because we're dealing with a situation where the scars are on the inside, right? It's invisible, that it was impossible for this particular teacher or school to understand that this was actually a real thing. And it actually was quite a journey for us as parents to go through a situation where we almost felt like we were being gaslit, of just like, well, we're older parents. I was 40 when I had my son. So almost like we were being the helicopter parents and maybe being too concerned. And it was a real struggle.
I can relate on so many different levels. I have my daughter is about to turn 21. I have a special needs daughter. She has a very rare brain disorder. She didn't walk until she was 3. She wasn't potty trained until she was after the age of 5. I had to petition to get her into school because she wasn't potty trained, and that was a big deal. And I knew that starting at the age of 2, she was in physical occupational speech therapy and all of these things. And because she looked normal,
Yeah.
then over and over and over again throughout her life. And now I've gone through this for 18 years. I would go in and try and set them up for success. Okay, here is where she excels. And I am very much an empowering parent. Like, I very much pushed her to be her best and also recognize what her limitations are, because I don't want to set unrealistic expectations and have her feel as if she's less than, because she absolutely is not. She is amazing. She's the best thing I've ever done on this planet. And repeatedly, she would join and they're like, oh, she'll be fine. And then 2 weeks later, I would get a parent teacher conference. Oh, your child is delayed in this. And I'm like, really? It's almost like I kind of tried to tell you that 2 weeks ago and you wouldn't listen to me and hear that for that exact same reason. I'm so glad you shared that, because I think back to the days when, as a child, I was severely, severely abused as a child, and of course came across as very highly functioning. Child Protective Services came many, many, many times and went away and said, oh, she's completely fine. I was absolutely not fine. I can't imagine how my life would have been different had they actually realized, no, I was being severely abused, and things would have been different. And so just that reality, listeners, that children and individuals have the ability, first of all, to not realize what's normal and what's not normal, and to adjust and to project that they're coping when they're really not coping. And so this idea of journaling to express emotions that words are not available for, or that that they're afraid to appear for words. I was looking at a couple of the other things. So one of the things is that you have this child, the son of yours, and he's really struggling because he's tried to go to school, and the very next day had this horrific experience. And so now he's tied the two of them together. They will forever be tied in the brain. He now has this invisible disability. And being someone, I'm a kidnapping survivor. I have PTSD. I have a service dog. I have individuals all the time who say, you look completely healthy. What's wrong with you? And it's like, well, I have an invisible disability. I still have a disability. I'm sorry. And so here you have your son in this situation. As a parent, you want to help your child grow. And so you think of different ways. And so you walk through in your book. I'm thinking of in page 18, you start talking about why it's important. Really, in the book, you do a really good job of guiding the parent or significant other. This could be anyone in the child's life. It could be a therapist. It could be
a teacher,
counselor. It could be a teacher. It could be an older sibling. It could be anyone. Okay. Anyone who wants to help be a part of this child's life. Okay. And you walk them through, here is how you can be successful in making sure they don't feel like they're being pressured to succeed, to be perfect, to not get it wrong. Right. So on page 18, you say an adult's full presence showing up on the journal page with an attitude of fun and play can have a powerful physiological and restorative impact that allows oxytocin, which many of us can remember when you think about even nursing, if you're breastfeeding a child and you think about that oxytocin bonding. So it impacts and allows that bonding, the good hormones, to feed the brain. So you go into, it's not the length or the quality of time or the quantity of time, but the quality of being present that is the connective tissue. So I wanted to quote that phrase because when you start walking through in your book saying, okay, go buy some kind of journal with blank pages and slowly encourage the child to sit down with you for whatever period of time, let them choose how long. and don't make it mandatory, but it's fun. Let's figure out how to do it. And then make sure that during that time, you are fully focused on that period of time and that your full focus and allowing them to do them and you do them during that period of time, that release of that oxytocin is that bonding and that loving moment that that child needs to heal in that. And I just love that. When I read that and I was trying to picture being in that moment, I just kind of felt like it was a hug in that moment.
It is a hug. It is. And it's funny that you bring that up because I remember saying to my editor, like, it feels like this is so obvious to me. And she's like, no, because I think as adults, we can make things really complicated where we think that we have to instruct. We think that we ourselves have to perform. And actually the biggest, and that's why it's the quality. It's not the quantity. It's not actually what we're doing. It's actually my full presence in terms of being present to Nicolle, what's going on with myself, and being able to still be adaptable and communicate with the person, the child next to you. And it's like, it's so beautiful to like let them lead and then you lead. And it's like, oh, I'm curious about this. I remember one day, and I still have this journal. The amazing thing about the journals is my son can flip through the journals and he can literally see a page and say, this is the car accident here. This is the fire. This is here. And these pages are not.
I love that when he
pages
was like, this one is the flying glass. And I'm
Yeah.
looking at it and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm taking his word for it because I don't necessarily see the flying glass. But to him, how amazing, right?
Yeah, it's not about the art. It's not about the perfect thing on the page. And I think as adults, we get into that. We are so colonized by school that we think like, okay, now I'm going to sit down with you to connect. So I have to tell you what to do. And actually the opposite is true. If I am, and I give that example in the book is full of illustrations and examples of us losing our cat. Like our cat, Ben, didn't come home. And so my son was really upset. So what I did was start sitting at the page on my journal page and just started painting the word be on the page and talking about what I thought had happened to Ben that day. So I was actually with my own feelings. And then my son came, and every time he was worried and his anxiety was high because he was waiting for his precious Ben to come home, we would take another color and we would do another color on the page. Having that time together of connecting and me validating his feelings, just being with. Sometimes I think as adults, we think we need to do more. We need to talk. We need to explain. We need to fix. We need to change. And actually, what we need to do is be with, non-distracted time of just being with. And there was lots of days, where I was just the one sitting at the table as a mom having a hard day, acknowledging my own feelings. Well, what are you doing, Mom? I'm having a hard time today. I feel sad, right? It's like we're also teaching emotional literacy. We're teaching how to take care of ourselves. And ultimately, that's what we want for our children. We want them to have those skills of self-regulation. Well, that self-regulation, I can be the model for that self-regulation, and journaling or creative expression on the page is one of the ways that I can help myself self-regulate, right? I can help myself process in that I'm modeling to do it for my child. And I really think adults, sometimes we try too hard. It's humbling. It's a humbling process to have a balance between being in your own experience on the page. I want to color with purple. Okay. And also being present to your child and curious instead of like, oh, that's pretty. Oh, you need to make another window here. You're saying, tell me about this picture you're doing. Tell me why you like that color so much. It's a different conversation. And we actually end up getting to know each other, and attachment, as we all know, is so, so healing for children, right? that time together. Yeah, and I just remember one day my son said we were curious about like sparkles, and like he was really little, and so we kept putting sparkles on the page, and he was getting mad, of course, because they weren't sticking on the page. And so we figured out a way, we put sparkles on the page, and we just put all this clear tape all over the page so that the sparkles could stay there. It was just like we're also finding solutions for things, right?
Oh, wow. Okay. So a couple things. One, the engineer in me loves this, what you just said, because I talk to students all the time. You are not getting a degree in X, Y, and Z. You are getting an education on how to solve problems. That right there is exactly that, how to solve problems. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Secondly, you talk of in talking about how to talk to children and how to work with children. You talk about tender hearts. And on page 47, you say staying heart centered with tender hearts means walking in the shoes of a child, remembering to stay soft, curious, kind, and flexible. And I so love that. And then earlier you quote Bernie Warren, the author of Using the Creative Arts in Therapy. So listeners, if you haven't researched play therapy, you should. And Janine, who was on episode 8, if you're listening to this episode, stop listening and saying, yes, and that's what I told you with sand therapy. I don't want to hear it. You can say it some other. I know I'm going to get a text message about it from Janine. But anyway, research play therapy and the benefits of play therapy. But I'm going to include this quote that you gave that is Bernie's quote in Using the Creative Arts in Therapy. And you said, all human beings, and I think this ties to listeners, if you think, okay, I have this child that, and I want to also be clear, we're talking about a child who's gone through a tragedy. I think this is phenomenal for the growth of every single human being. So I think a child at every stage, in episode 15, when we talked about making friends with monsters, yes, Sam in that book, he went through a lot of tragedies. But the beauty of that book is learning how to talk about emotions and deal with emotions. So the beauty of learning journaling and creative arts is for every stage of life, whether you've had a tragedy or not, is learning those key components of how to express it in a healthy way. So I'm going to say two different things. I'm going to talk about expressing it and what the expressing is. And then I'm also going to talk about how you mentioned addiction and why this is so valuable so that the child, as they grow, they learn to use this method of expression versus the addiction methods. So going back to Bernie's quote, he said, all human beings, irrespective of their abilities or limitations, are capable of making their own unique creative thumbprints. I'll pause about that. Like their own unique creative thumbprints. We need to all remember that. Listeners, wherever you're sitting doing right now, just pause for a second and think about what you're doing in your life right now. There's something you're doing in your life right now that is your own unique creative thumbprint, and that is amazing. Okay, so we're all capable of that. Each mark, so we're going back to the journal, and we think about Nicole's son, when I said he was looking back and he said at a page and he says, oh yeah, that was the glass going all over the place. And I'm looking at the image and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take your word for it. But to him, that's exactly what it is. So each mark, whether it's made in sound, line, color, form, shape, or movement, is one that no one else could ever make in exactly the same way. So Nicole's son could look at those images and remember exactly what he was feeling in that moment. And in that moment, because Nicolle made this journal available to him, he was able to express it. So in this mark, so continuing the quote, in this mark, which states, I exist, I have meaning. So by allowing your children to do this, or the child that you're collaborating with to do this, you're allowing them to say they exist, they have meaning, and it reflects an individual as a unique human being. So you're giving that as a gift to them. So what's the alternative? So the reason that I love this approach that you've developed, Nicolle, and in this book and how you're walking individuals through this, because I've seen the alternative of this. I've lived the alternative of this. And I'm thinking, as you're talking about your son and you're coming from the home from the hospital and he's trying to deal with this and you have the school issues. I had in my teens, I happened to come across tapes of court recordings when they recorded me and I was being interviewed about all the child abuse that I had. And I heard, and it was really interesting because I think my voice was probably like a 3-year-old's voice. So I don't remember exactly what I said, but I still remember in my head at 48, my 3-year-old's voice of that. And I wonder how that experience might have been different if I had been journaling that abuse that had been expressed and how my growth might have been different because using your outlet allows that level of expression. So on page 53, you talk about the healthier options a child has to cope with. So by providing this as a healthy option, so the healthier options a child has to cope with what is going on in both their inner and outer worlds, the least likely they are to act out or develop unhealthy coping mechanisms like numbing out, self-harm, turning to substance, whether it be drugs, excess video games, etc. So I just want to tie those couple of things together and how important. So when I read that, I thought, okay, I can totally see how Nicolle experiencing this and your history in addiction and recovery and addiction and your life mesh these together.
Well, it's funny because I never saw that for a long time. Like, I think that's why I didn't write the book for a long time, because I thought I do this work. I do this work with adults in recovery. Because let's remember what addiction is, right? Addiction is trauma. Addiction is loneliness. Addiction is I have no one to understand or make meaning of what's going on. And so journaling makes sense to me. We and Bernie Warren's quote about whenever we make that mark, we're saying, I matter. My feelings and my thoughts matter. And as we know, for those folks who suffer in addictions, they do not often have that one person that says, you matter. What you're going through matters. Your experience, your thoughts, your emotions matter, right? And so then we turn to those maladaptive behaviors. Whereas if you have outlets and you've had the experience of someone being with you when you're going through something, you're not alone. You have that experience of being validated, of being heard, of not being dismissed, right? Not being criticized, not being judged, all those things. You have that kind of foundation so that when big feelings do come up, you're less likely for it to have a negative reaction or a negative impulse because of it. Journaling is still the number one recommended educational tool, strategy tool, and therapeutic tool, right? And it's one of the first things that we do in treatment centers with adults when they're getting sober and clean, and all of a sudden all the feelings come up. And where do the feelings go? Where do they go? Well, we have to start to find more adaptive behaviors in how to deal with those feelings, right? We go to meditation, we go to prayer, we go to exercise, we go to self-care, we go to journaling, we go to these pieces. I really think that children, I see it all the time because part of my work with my book is I do consultations with parents on how to do this work, and I see it everywhere. We were on a waiting list for dealing with my son's anxiety for, I don't know, a year and a half. And how many colleagues and parents and friends and moms were saying to me, I wish we could do something. We're just on this waiting list. And I think, you know what? There are things that we can do. And this isn't replacing the work of good therapists or play therapists or anything, but it is something that parents and caregivers and those who are nurturing kids can do, right? We can be with, because I think I heard it, whether it was Gabor Mate or whatever, talk about addiction being this lonely need for connection. So again, the quality is about connection. It's not the quantity. It's not how many journals they have. It's not the most perfect journal. It's not the most expensive pens. It's not how pretty the picture is, right? It's actually that quality of connection. Am I really listening? Am I really heart connected to you without attaching to the outcome of perfection on the page? because perfectionism can sneak in, right? Well, that doesn't look like a house. What do you mean? Right? Well, that fire engines aren't green. And we can do that. We can see it from a lens, but then when it's our own child, we have to constantly be on guard for what are my expectations here? Am I having a critical lens here? Or am I coming from a heart-centered place of like, wow, this is our time together? Yeah, it's been a really powerful it's a powerful tool for adults and a super powerful tool, I think, that parents and kids can use together to really build positive attachment together, especially in a world where sitting down at the dinner table and having that time together is really precious.
Oh, it absolutely is. And so I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm thinking about the diversity of tools. So I was a Girl Scout growing up and went all the way through. So in Girl Scouts, you can go all the way through the Gold Award, just like in Boy Scouts as an Eagle Scout. So I am a very decorated Girl Scout. And I believe in having as many tools as you possibly can so that you can apply them to the situation as is
Mhm.
appropriate. And so when I think about journaling, one of the things I was thinking about when you were just talking about this is I thought, wow, listeners may think like I did. When I think of journaling, I think of words and writing sentences on a piece of paper. And that's what
Mhm.
journaling is to me. But that is one
Mm-mm.
form of journaling. There are
Yeah.
probably many forms of journaling. And in the example we're talking about right now, it's art, it is drawing, it is pictures that express emotions in a picture format when words are not something that the child can express. In episode 11, we talked about the use of AI in journaling, which I'm a fan of because I actually have a lot of journals, meaning leather bound books that are really pretty that I keep starting and I'll write a couple pages in them and then I never finish. However, I like the AI models because they create prompts for me and they help me think through this journaling process. So there's a lot of research in journaling in all different modalities about the beneficial use of it in treatment. And so I just want to point out that journaling is not just words to paper or words to, your Word document or anything.
Yeah, no, not at all. And in fact, the program that I designed for treatment centers is all about it's launched actually in the US and Florida. I'm training the team of counselors this week again, going through training with them. And a lot of the people that they're working with actually have literacy issues. So they can't write. And part of that is the whole reason why my work is called creative journaling, because it's all about using colors, mind maps, stickers, cutting things out, one words. It's all about expression rather than you have to be a perfect writer. Because as soon as we get into that mode, can bring up a lot of expectations, a lot of perfectionism on punctuation and spelling and grammar and all of those things, right? And we want that journaling piece to be as an accessible outlet that isn't about these are the rules of journaling. And one of the things that I talk about is really informed guidance. So using writing prompts, but also even within the writing prompts, having complete flexibility and freedom to, I don't want to write a paragraph today. I want to decorate one word on the page. I just want to take every green color, every green object I can find and see if I can stick it on this page. It's that idea. I think creativity, we're living in an age now where we still don't even understand the impact of creativity on the brain or color on the brain. I'm reading a new book that just came out in 2023 called Your Brain on Art. And it is incredible, the neuroplasticity. So one of the reasons that I get excited about journaling is journaling has the power to create new neural pathways in our brain. And so whether you're doing it with a 4-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 50-year-old who's in a treatment center for the first time, you have that power to build neuroplasticity in the brain, right? And we know that neurons that fire together wire together. And we have that power to start creating positive neural pathways. And that's really what we're doing when we sit down with our kids, or if you're an education assistant or a counselor or a grandparent or an auntie or an uncle or someone who's concerned with the mental health of another child, you have that opportunity to sit next to them and to start to build some positive neural pathways.
I saw one other piece in your book that I wanted to read out that really stood out to me. And then I wanted to check and see if there was something we didn't cover. And then, of course, get your motivational quote.
Sure.
One of the things that I want to pull us back to invisible disabilities. And then I also, in tying into that, on page 48, you talk about trauma-informed individuals. And I loved this pictorial that you did. I'm not sure pictorial is the right word. We can all look it up and see if Anne got it right or not. Point being is that it said a trauma-informed classroom teacher recognizes that the student with his head on his desk most mornings has been up all night because he often hears gunfire in his neighborhood. She has adjusted her approach to engaging the student in class, and he or she is better able to learn. A trauma-informed police officer enters a home on a domestic violence call, and after ensuring that everyone is safe, gets down on one knee to speak softly to the small child who just watched her father being arrested. A trauma-informed pediatric nurse on a busy inpatient unit notices that a young patient in her care is extremely quiet and withdrawn in the hours leading up to a planned surgical procedure. She takes a few moments to talk with the patient and his family to understand and address their specific worries and concerns. I wanted to quote that because I thought, if we as human beings, wherever we're at, if we put on the hat of being trauma informed and we utilize the tools that you're providing in your book, then we can utilize these tools in all areas of our life. We have so many opportunities, regardless of what our job is, to have this mindset and utilize these tools.
Exactly. Trauma-informed work is such a healer and is such a beautiful approach. And, in simplest terms, there's so many definitions of trauma-informed, but for me, it's really about staying heart-centered. It's really about understanding, like, I need to approach this with a tender heart as an adult. How do I approach this with a tender heart? And certainly with children, but with everyone, how do I approach this with a tender heart? Right? Yeah.
Listeners, we've covered the highlights of this book. And so if you are passionate about healing, it's not just healing. I want to emphasize that. It's not just healing for a child in trauma. If you are passionate about helping the next generation be the best that they absolutely can be, then I will include in the show notes. And Nicolle, if you can also include how they can find your book, and we'll include it in the show notes as well. And sure. I want to include that. I want to say that this is not just for children. So I think it would be a phenomenal resource for courses in addiction treatment centers of all sorts, that especially ones that are trauma informed, because I believe that all treatment centers should be trauma informed. So yes. I want to say all of those things. And then I know you're working on some additional projects. So if you want to give a highlight about those additional projects and anything that you had hoped we would cover that we haven't already covered, if you want to kick that off, and then we'll end up with your motivational quote.
Thank you. Yes, I am a big fan of trauma-informed treatment centers as well. Also hospitals, pediatric wards, being able to any place. I think my book is suitable for any place where children need someone to uplift and give them a helping hand. But also, as Ange has said, I've had a lot of people who have long-term sobriety and recovery by my book. In fact, one woman bought 10 books and ended up giving them to all her sponsees and said, you need to do this work. And I like the way it's laid out.
I love that.
My book is easy to read, and it's a quick read, it's like it works as a resource guide. I have developed curriculum for adults, Creative Journaling, The Promises of Recovery program, which is a beautiful trauma-informed program for treatment centers, and also one for teens, creative journaling just for teens. And I'm hoping to connect with recovery high schools. I think it would be great to have that curriculum there. And if you're a family member who wants a consultation, you can reach me that way. I have a digital copy of the book. I was very mindful about that because I wanted it to be accessible to people right away. But you can also get a hard copy on Amazon, and you can look up information about it on my website, NicolleNattrass.com. And yeah, it's been wonderful, wonderful discussion. I'm so excited about this podcast. It's so wonderful to have this out in the world. And there's so many episodes that I need to catch up on.
Well, I can't wait to hear your feedback on the other episodes, Nicolle.
Great.
So I will include all this information in the show notes. So if you haven't already sent it to me, please email it to me so I make sure I get it correct and I don't make any mistakes in the show notes. So I'll include that. And what are your favorite motivational quotes?
Okay. Well, there's so many, but I can only pick one.
It's hard.
So this is what I want to leave you with by a gentleman that I think had an incredibly tender heart. I think his work in the world changed our world and changed us as people. And that is Fred Rogers. And this is his quote. He says, "There are 3 ways to ultimate success. The first way is to be kind. The second way is to be kind. And the third way is to be kind." I just love that man. I just love him.
That's so beautiful. And I have tears.
Me too. He's just an incredible man. Yeah.
Thank you, Nicolle. This is amazing. I'm so grateful.
Me too. Thank you so much. It's so great to connect with you and to your listeners. Yeah.
As a victim of severe childhood abuse, I have a tender heart for this topic. I hope that each of you took away some inspiration for how you can create a safe place for children around you to land, grow, and thrive. If you want more information about Nicolle, you can reach her on her website at www.NicolleNattrass.com. That's spelled www.NicolleNattrass.com. For recovery, check out her creative journaling courses at NicoleNattrass.com/creative-journaling-courses. As a reminder, I've added the links to purchase her books and these details in the show notes. Additionally, the experiences and advice expressed in this episode are the host and guest's own personal stories and do not represent the opinions of any organization mentioned. RAN is passionate about opening the doors for all voices and experiences, not just those expressed in any particular podcast. If you want to share your experiences or expertise, we encourage you to be a future guest by emailing us at podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org or submit a blog post by emailing blog@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. We have even started a new blog series where we will read select blog posts on the podcast. So submit your blog post today. We also encourage you to comment on this episode so that we continue to provide content that is most beneficial to the community. If you do, we'll even give you a shout out. We are proud that every individual working with RAN does so on a 100% volunteer basis. You can support the mission by clicking the love, not like, icon on our podcast and subscribing. The reception of this podcast blows us away, and hence, we are seeking a volunteer podcast publishing assistant. If you're interested, please email us at podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. We hope you will connect with us at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org, where you can donate to the mission, read blog posts, and stay in the loop about upcoming events. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Recovery Advocate Network and on Twitter at RAN to Wellness. So, listeners, pause what you're doing and subscribe. Follow us. give us that 5-star rating and provide some feedback. And finally, share these episodes with your friends. You never know whose heart you will touch. We already have listeners in close to 20 countries around the world. Be a part of the reason someone has new hope today. If this episode was triggering to you, we encourage you to contact your support system, therapist, national and community support groups, the Global Crisis Text Line by texting 741-741, and/or if in the United States, dialing 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you live in a country outside of the U.S. and have information for helpful resources, please email us so we can provide those to listeners. We know you are busy, so thank you for spending time with us today. And we especially appreciate you sharing this message with those around you and sharing healing, strength, and of course, holding hope for those around you until they have hope for themselves. Thank you for joining us. And now, back to your coffee.